Those are our
close out?
lists.
You wanna close out with our argument?
Yeah.
Gameplay versus story.
Yeah, so I can let you start off this talk a little bit right now.
All right. So I know you're more gameplay focused when it comes to approaching games, or at least you were in the past. And for me, I've always valued story over anything, whether if I'm watching a movie or a TV show or experiencing any kind of form of art, even if I'm looking at a painting. I'm always like looking for the story behind the art form. If there isn't any story, if it's coming out of pure randomness, without any purpose, it doesn't grab my attention. So the same applies to a video game. Like I wrote a few notes here. What I wrote down is that I'm saying a story is a must. Whatever the game developers start working on first, whether they start working on gameplay or whether they start working on story, I think the story must be very good at gripping the audience's attention. And when I say very good, I don't mean that the story has to be good in a traditional way. Every single game that the developers make is made in a different style and made in a different way to be played. And I think whenever a developer is trying to think of what story would fit in that game, they need to design the story based off of the game's mechanics. Now, let me expand on my thoughts a little bit further on that. Some games are straightforward. Some games are just simple in their motivation. Like take, for example, like the original Donkey Kong that we just talked about, or let's say a game like Doom, or a game like that retro game that I liked, Enter the Gungeon. All of these games, what they have in common is a simple game design that has a lot of replayability. All these games, what they want out of you as a gamer is to replay the game consistently. So what kind of story would pair well with that would be a very generalized but engaging form of a story. Like for Elden Ring, I think we talked about this before. You're one of the tarnished, and you're sent in this world. You have to prove yourself. That's the story. Yes, the world is rich with many weapons, many lore, storylines, different kinds of animations and spells. But at the end of the day, they just want you to dodge, kill, and explore. And for these simple like aspects of the game, they made a simple story where it's like, hey, you're a tarnished, you need to prove yourself in that world. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like Mario, like Donkey Kong. Hey, you're just a good guy, you want to save this princess, go defeat evil. But then you get stories that are more complex, that have more of a longer narrative. And that comes from the developer's artistic take. Maybe the developer does not want to make a game that you constantly replay. Maybe they want to make a journey. They want to make an experience like Skyward Sword, like Metal Gear Solid, like Uncharted, like Persona 5, like GTA 5. All of these games, they're not necessarily made to be replayed. They're made as a long journey. And if you want to make a game that has a long journey, it has to be built on a good story for it to have that grand feeling, that epicness to it. And those kinds of games that do not necessarily have a solid gameplay foundation, like the games that have a lot of replayability. And that's okay, because the story really carries the game. Like look at Uncharted. Gameplay is very simple. It's you take cover, you shoot, you jump. Very, very simple. Metal Gear, especially Metal Gear Solid 1, you just walk around, you switch between your gadgets or your weapons, and the gameplay is not necessarily the best, but the journey, the story, the experience, that's what keeps you hooked. And whatever type of game you're trying to make, whether it's a long journey that's grand and explorative, or a game that's like arcadey and replayable, you have to engage your audience somehow. Like I'm playing Burnout Paradise, for example. Burnout Paradise is just a simple game of you running around the streets, winning a bunch of races. But what they tell you at the beginning of the game is that, hey, this is your cred level. You have to get that cred level up. Like, try to get engaged in that game. Try to be the best in that Paradise City. I'm not saying that Burnout Paradise is like the gold standard of what a good story should be. But usually the game needs to have like a gripping story, just like Donkey Kong did it, just like Enter the Gungeon did it, just like Elden Ring did it. No matter how simple or complex the story is, it has to exist and it has to be compelling.
Yeah. All right. Here's what I'm gonna say. Of course, I think every single game that is out now definitely has a story, whether it be good or bad. Story is like kind of like a necessity in a game now, and like there are people on like game development teams who entirely focus on narrative, just narrative, like in terms of dialogue, narrative progression in the story and the gameplay and things like that. So it's a very, very, very important part of the game. But I will also say this, and this is something I have heard from interviews and I've heard from like the developers and things like that. And this is just something to think about. It's not a fact. It's not a rule. It's not a rule of thumb or anything. This is just something to think about and something I've always thought about. Let's take the Zelda team, for example. You said a game like Skyward Sword needs that story first, and then the gameplay can be layered on it, right? I'll tell you this. The Zelda team never writes a story first. They never do that. They always think, how do we want Link to feel like in this game? How do we want Link to move like? What items do we want to like have him use? What's the gimmick of this game? So for Ocarina of Time, they're like, we gotta put him in a 3D environment, give him some good sword combat, and maybe make him an adult too. And when that adult thing came out, they're like, oh, okay, we'll build a story behind that. With Majora's Mask, Aonuma was like, oh, okay, I'm under a very big like time crunch. How would I make the game have that same time crunch? And I was like, and then he was like, oh, I have to make this game in like such a short amount of time. How about I reuse assets from the first game? Oh, I'm reusing the same characters. How about I make it so this game takes place in an alternate reality from Hyrule? Wind Waker, they're like, oh, how do we expand the openness of Ocarina of Time? Let's put it in the sea. Let's make Link like a pirate. Let's put him on an open sea adventure. And why are we in the open sea? Oh, maybe Hyrule got flooded before this game started. So like that. Same with Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is a little weird. Twilight Princess, they just wanted to make like a better Ocarina of Time, and so I don't know the development behind that. Skyward Sword was interesting though, because they said Twilight Princess didn't utilize the full capabilities of the motion controls. So we want to make a game with the full capabilities of the motion controls. And they saw Wii Sports Resort, of all games, Wii Sports Resort with the sword fighting in Wii Sports Resort. And the Zelda team was like, we want to make a game, we want to make a Zelda game like this, where Link uses the sword like this. And then they eventually started to like figure that out, and they're like, let's make this game about the creation of the Master Sword, such an important relic in the Zelda games, because you are using the sword to like forge the journey of the game, basically. So from there, Skyward Sword came. Breath of the Wild is a completely different story. Breath of the Wild's first gameplay showcase was an entirely different game. And when they realized what they needed to do to make this game the best that it can be, they added so much in there, so much new gameplay, so much new story. It's a whole different thing. I'll I'll send you videos about Breath of the Wild and its development, but that's just one series, the Zelda series.
But
Persona, I don't know much, but what's
hold
cool,
on,
what?
hold on. Before you go on to Persona, I just want to remind you that the Legend of Zelda franchise has one of the most complex, interesting storylines out there. And you're the one that continuously backs up how amazing the story is before you talk about any of the game.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I should have prefaced this by saying I don't dislike stories in games. I don't I don't ignore stories in games. And I don't think stories are not important. And sometimes I feel like I keep emphasizing gameplay so much that I sort of feel like I'm ignoring the story. I think there should be a good balance, but I feel like the things I am doing in the game as a player while playing the game are just more important to me than like a good narrative. Because for example,
Let me counter that with a quick question. If you had all the Zelda games that are currently existing today be played the exact same way, same gameplay mechanics, same enemies, but the way that they're presented to you is in a very standalone-ish like story format, a very simplified, generalized story format that does not connect the games in any way whatsoever. It's just a simple, straightforward mission of like if all the games were structured in a very simplified story as like you're Link, go save the princess, fight the bad guys, win the game. If it's like so simple like that, would you still put Zelda as like your favorite franchise?
yes, because that's basically, well, here's the thing. I'll give you two responses to that. Before 2011 and when the timeline was created, that's basically what Zelda was. They are standalone stories that don't really connect unless you see the very fine details. So that's what's cool about it. But another thing is, let's take, for example, maybe the Zelda stories, hypothetically in another universe, are more simple, less involved, maybe a little more like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring. I would still enjoy it because I played a game this year which was exactly like that. And it's not Elden Ring. It's called Tunic. Tunic is a game which combines 2D Zelda elements with Souls-like gameplay. And it really feels like Zelda to me. The design, the environment, the enemies, the characters, the weapons, the items, it all feels like Zelda. Gameplay is, of course, kind of like Souls, right? But Tunic has so much mystery. The whole game is literally in your notebook. The whole story of the game is in your notebook. And your notebook is also teaching you the game. Your notebook is like it's like a puzzle in itself that you have to solve. It gives you very cryptic clues about what's going on in the world around you. And it doesn't there's no dialogue, there's no cutscenes, there's no nothing. All the story is in the like clues that you see in the world and all the clues that you see in the notebook. So that kind of hands-off storytelling, if they put that in a Zelda game, I would really, really like it.
But what's Tunic about? Like, what do you do in the game?
Tunic, from what I know that it's about right now, is it's a very simple story. You just have to like ring.
Not story, like the gameplay.
Oh, it's like I said, it's a isometric style 3D game with elements of 2D Zelda and Souls. So you have like your sword, and you're destroying enemies.
I see.
You get currency, kind of like Souls or runes or like that. And if you die, you lose all of those, and you can get them back.
Let me give you a proposition. Now you've seen the Superman demos, right?
Yeah.
In the Matrix Resurrections like demo or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know what a Telltale game is. You know, like you pick a decision or a choice of word. Like, what would be more compelling to you to play a Telltale game or to play like a demo with just pure gameplay?
Well, a Telltale game is like a complete game, isn't it? And the demo is just like a
Well,
demo.
a Telltale game is technically like a movie that you get to
Yeah.
decide how it turns out. You're not necessarily involved. You're kind of like picking a multiple choice question, A or B.
Yeah. I don't know I don't know about like the comparison between a demo of an incomplete game and the complete game, which is like basically just story. But I will say this.
Like, have you seen Dreams, the video
Yeah.
game? So you know how people can make like mock like video games
Yeah.
where you can still win. Imagine if a game developer, like a good one, made a really solid game design, but it has absolutely no story. Not even a story like Mario where he has to go save the princess. It's just a level design where you beat bad people just to beat them or whatever, or get to the top of the mountain just to get there. And then you have a Telltale game that is pure story. I'm just saying you have two options: pure gameplay and pure story. Which one would make you last longer in playing? And
That's
the
a
reason why
tough
I'm
question. But I will say this. I'll think about that answer. I might honestly, I may just go with the gameplay, because here's the thing. It really depends on my mood. If I want to play a game, then I would play the gameplay game. If I want to experience a story, then I would play like Walking Dead or something. Because I find it like I just like, if I want to sit down and play a game, it wouldn't be a game like Detroit Become Human, where I'm just pressing buttons to make choices and watching what's happening.
yeah.
Because I want to be engaged with what the character is doing. I want to make the
Yeah.
choices in the sense that I want to do the walking, I want to do the attacking, I want to do the flying and climbing and grappling and like
Yeah.
all that.
Like sometimes
I want
like,
to
I
be
get
part of
home.
that. Like,
Sometimes I get home just to play like multiplayer games like 2K or Call of Duty or something like Tropico, which like you build your own world
yeah,
that has literally no story, but it's just the simulation.
yeah,
of
and you're
being-
still involved in the process of doing
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
yeah. I get your point.
yeah, because
Yeah.
video games for me like keep me like active in a
Yeah,
way.
it keeps your it's like you're engaging your mental part of you instead
Yeah.
of like actually doing it.
Yeah, and that's what I love so much about Zelda, because whenever I go into a Zelda dungeon, like any Zelda dungeon, I have to like really start thinking. I have to like tune out like some other distractions and be like, how do I solve these puzzles? And
I guess my argument coming into this is that stories have existed for forever in terms of media, like books, movies, TV shows, podcasts. And I always viewed video games as being like another art form,
yeah,
but it's actually rather a mix of both
Yeah.
art form and an activity. Because
yeah,
playing video games is literally like going outside for a walk, or it's like going to play a board game with a friend, or it's like going to be physically engaged.
that's why I'm very excited for you to eventually play a game like Breath of the Wild, because it's something entirely different, in the sense that you create your own journey. You have the story in front of you. You can go back and see the story. You can like figure out what's been going on in this world, but you're creating your own journey with all the memories that you make, finding different areas, encountering different enemies. Like it's something I haven't experienced before. And the closest thing that came to that was Elden Ring, and that's why I really enjoyed Elden
I'm
Ring.
actually kind of shocked we didn't include any of the Elden Ring boss fights.
Actually, Radon was close to being on there, and
Yeah,
I should
Radon was
have put
badass.
Radon on my honorable mentions actually.
Oh man, I should have put him too.
Yeah, Radon was a good one. Radon was a very good fight. But
Yeah.
so one thing I wanted to say real quick is whether a story is written first or gameplay is developed first, that doesn't dictate the success of a game. If basically like I'll give a hypothetical example. If like Naughty Dog has come out and said and like, oh, we have the story for The Last of Us 3 already written. That doesn't mean The Last of Us 3 is gonna be a bad game.
Oh yeah,
right?
a bad game.
Yeah. I mean, people have their own opinions on Last of Us 2, but like the fact that Naughty Dog already wrote the story of Last of Us 3 doesn't mean that Last of Us 3, if it happens,
it could be the best one in
yeah,
this series.
yeah, maybe. Who knows? Yeah. But and same thing, vice versa. Like if a gameplay mechanic and scope is developed first, that doesn't necessarily mean a game is doomed. Or if the story is developed first, doesn't mean it's doomed.
You mentioned to me that gameplay developers, or like just game developers in general, like make gameplay first because that's like the most common technique. And I actually see the point behind that. If somebody is making a game, the game has to work.
Yeah,
that's really. But I think where I am developing like my argument is that shouldn't be like your last step. It should be a 2-step process. Make a good solid game basis, which is your gameplay, but the story that's gonna like grab the audience has to fit your style of game.
Yeah, definitely. And it should be like developed simultaneously. The gameplay should be improved simultaneously with the story being developed, I think. I mean, yeah.
Dude, you won me over with the with your like last argument, because games are not just an art form. They're also an activity that engages. It's a very complex thing. Games are complex.
Yeah.
Because it can engage you just how like a sport engages an athlete, but it can also engage you in a way that a moviegoer is engaged by a movie at a film. Yeah. It engages everything in you, and it's literally simulating an experience.
Yeah. And yeah, I very much agree. It's simulating an experience, and you're definitely, you as a player are a very big part of that. And one thing I wanted to add is I remember one developer saying that when they were working on like their game, which ended up like being very well received, he said that they worked so hard on the gameplay and then they layered the story on top of it to like fit based on what they wanted to make. And then he basically said something which I agree with, but I also may not agree with. He said gameplay always sells the game, the story never sells the game. But I always say, like, with a game like Xenoblade Chronicles, I think the story sells it more than the gameplay.
Yeah.
Or a game like maybe Uncharted 4, the fact that Nate's brother Sam is in the game, I think sold it more than the fact that you're using a grappling hook. You know?
I really don't care much how Rocksteady is changing the Justice League's Kill the Justice League, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Their next game, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. I really don't care what they're doing with the gameplay that much. Dude, you're gonna kill the freaking Justice League.
Yeah.
That's a hook. That's one hell of a hook. I'm hooked on that story. Yeah. But, you know, going back to the game I brought up today, Fury, the one that's about just boss battles, I'm pretty sure they made the game mechanics and then they created this badass lore around it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I can see a lot of games being made that way, but you get a diamond every now and then, like the Arkham games, which, by the way, did not have the combat system until later, towards the end of production.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what they were going for with that game design, but then they added the fighting later in their production.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Sefton Hill or one of the leads was talking about that. And I found that
I'll
very
look into
interesting
that.
because that
That's very
was
cool.
like the biggest revolution in gaming was their combat system. But
Yeah,
again, that was something that was added later.
yeah.
I,
But
you
one,
said a great balance for
yeah,
whatever game you're going for is definitely needed. Like
yeah.
the
And
right amount of gameplay and
yeah.
story.
I'll end with this. I'll give you one example of a game that balances gameplay and story very well, and also a game which I think actually had more of a story developed before its gameplay. And I may be wrong about this, so I have to go back and fact check and see some more of the interviews with the director and the scenario writer. But Xenoblade Chronicles, essentially, the director and the scenario writer said, I want to make a game that appeals to Western and Japanese audiences. And that was their goal. Western and Japanese audiences. We want to appeal to both of those demographics. And then the scenario writer already had developed other games in the Xeno series. So he had Xenogears with Squaresoft. Xenosaga was Monolith Soft's first like foray into their own kind of RPGs. And before they made Xenoblade, Tetsuya Takahashi had his own idea of what his perfect work saga would be, like the story beats and the kind of elements that would be within the narrative and like how it would conclude and things like that, right? And some of like the twists and turns around the way. I need to look more into the Perfect Work saga because it's very interesting how Takahashi has made that. Hold on a sec. And essentially I feel I may not be right about this, but I feel like the gameplay was layered on top of the story, vice versa, because they were just like, we want to make a game for Western and Japanese audiences. And Takahashi already had the basis for his story. He accommodated it to that Xenoblade world because like Takahashi one day had a vision of like the two titans, Bionis and Mechonis, fighting. And he told his team, he was like, hey, what if we make a game on top of these two titans? And they created those they created those like models of the Bionis and Mechonis. And then from there, the game was developed with the
Yeah.
story and the gameplay and things. But like the whole premise and some basic story was there to like kick it off. So it can be done in different ways. It can be
Yeah.
started in different ways and it can end in different ways. Like the whole design process of games and anything is just so it's a zigzag and like
And
roller
a game
coaster.
can hook you in both ways. It can hook you either
Yeah.
with its gameplay or story. Like you
Yeah.
said, Uncharted 4 hooked you with Nate's brother being in it. So you're like, okay, I want to see how that turns out. But then you get another game that just has like really good gameplay that you
Yeah.
just will play it for the gameplay.
Yeah. And what I yeah, and that perfect balance is very much seen in Xenoblade because I don't know really what got me to play the game initially. I just thought Shulk's sword, the Minato, looked really cool, so I wanted to know what's up with that.
You
And then I
know,
saw,
it's kind of interesting because when I saw Batman Arkham City, it was like the first Arkham game I've seen on YouTube. And I saw the mechanic where you can dive bomb
yeah,
and like glide back up. And that's what sold me to play the Arkham games. It was
yeah,
gameplay. It was not story
yeah,
because a lot of Batman games were out then by that time and they were not that great, most of them. So seeing that gameplay, I was like, whoa, okay,
yeah.
I want to play that.
Some small gameplay things and some small design choices are things that definitely hook players into games, and I very much agree with that. But yeah, I think that's basically all I had to say about that. But yeah, that was a it was a solid podcast. We had some good talks about both things, boss battles and gameplay and story. So, Shark, do you have any last remarks you want to say? And if you want to make any shout outs or like plug any of the things you're working on, you want to give a shout
Yeah.
out to that too?
No, big shout out to Nishant Kelkar for pursuing his passion on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm
Everybody
trying.
subscribe to this guy, like his
Yeah.
videos. He's doing a great job being consistent on his channel, and it's honestly a great fun time to be on here talking with you about the things we love that we grew up with.
Yeah, it's been a good.
And I hope there's a next one and we can keep doing more.
Oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, basically, yeah, it was a good time. Thanks, Shark, for joining. It was a lot of fun, and there will be more podcasts soon with Shark and some other people as well. So yeah, just a reminder, like, subscribe, and check out some other videos on game analysis, reviews, usability studies, and all that. It's Nishquick signing off. Have a good day, and that's also Shark signing off. Yeah, later.
Signing off.
Yeah.